Shavua Tov, my Chavarim. A good week to you, my friends. It is time for our fourth session of Heartfelt Haftarah. So, as we have been, we begin with tent stake business, talking about what we know and what we might want to know about the prophets within the Hebrew Bible. So I go back to my earlier discussion of how the prophets are divided, the section of the prophets in the Tanakh is divided between two types of prophetic books. There's the former prophets and the latter prophets, the narrative prophets and the literary prophets. And up to this point, our first three Haftarot have all been the book of Isaiah, a literary prophet, but now we're changing gears. And for our fourth Haftarah, to go with Vayeira in the book of Genesis, we are moving to the former prophets. And just to outline once again, I guess I should keep my stake close by since we're doing tent stake studies. Former prophets are the prophets historically earlier than the literary prophets for the most part, and they are characters in the various accounts, the annals, the stories that are told. So we don't have more than a little bit of dialogue about these particular prophets, but we have lots of stories about their acts and deeds. And they are distinguished from the literary prophets also because it just seems that their function is somewhat different. The former prophets, people like Nathan, like Elijah and Elisha, these are almost shamans. They are men of God who run about the countryside. They may offer predictions, they may intervene in politics, but they also do miracles. And that's probably one of the key things that will come up in our study this particular week. So let's talk about a miracle. A miracle in English is a miracle, but in Hebrew, there are a number of different terms that are used to describe a miracle. There's an oat, there is a nes, and there is a nora. So what are they? Oat, interestingly enough, in Hebrew, simply means a sign. And actually, oat is the Hebrew word also for a letter of the alphabet. So it's something that signifies something. And then nes refers to a flag or a banner. And so in a certain sense, it also signifies something to those who recognize it. And finally, nora, something awesome, generally is translated as wonder or remarkable thing, miracle. So the interesting thing is that as far as the Hebrew Bible, it uses language that leaves us with some room for ambiguity in a way perhaps the miracle doesn't. So an oat is a sign, and it could be a big sign like the parting of the Red Sea, or it can be a little sign. Likewise, a nes is a kind of sign, a banner, an alert, a flag, a red flag, as we would say in English, for those who are attentive to it. And then a wonder, wow, it's just something hard to account for. So we have the phrase taken from the Bible in English, signs and wonders, which is actually a pretty good translation of how those phrases are used in the Hebrew Bible. So what we have is a degree of ambiguity sometimes about miracles that may not be so clear, so ambiguous in the English imagination, English language imagination. So, some miracles are so amazing, it's hard to explain them, like the parting of the Red Sea, and yet we try to. And a lot of people devote a lot of energy to trying to come up with naturalistic explanations for how these things happen. We are confronted with these miracle stories, and you should understand that among the former prophets, the biggest source of miracle stories happened in the first and second book of Kings. That's our miracle cluster that goes along with the kinds of miracles that we see described in the 5 books of Moses. However, the previous former prophets, that be 1st and 2nd Samuel, has virtually no miracles happening in them at all. And in fact, most books of the Hebrew Bible have no miracles. So understand the miracles are centered at very particular times and in very particular books of the Hebrew Bible. And I might suggest this, that what we need to understand about stories about characters like Nathan and Elijah and Elisha is that there are almost more folk heroes. And just like Paul Bunyan with his giant blue ox, or John Henry, who could outrun a railway track laying machine, these are legends, and the stories they tell and the miracles accounted to them are legendary things, and we can approach them accordingly. And what I'm going to be sharing with you from our Haftarah this week from the Book of Kings is a miraculous tale involving the prophet Elisha. So I'm going to retire my tent peg, and we're going to go directly to our Haftarah portion. So to talk about our Haftarah portion, I want to call attention to E.T., the extraterrestrial. We like our miracles to be science miracles, but what we do want is we want miracles. So it's very hard not to be thrilled and moved when the children on their bicycles are fleeing from the nasty federal government, and in order to escape, just as they're about to be captured, E.T. is able to perform the miracle of putting all of the bicycles and children airborne, and they fly across the face of the moon. Who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love the moment when God or aliens step in to solve an insolvable problem, to overcome the normal way of the world? We love miracles. We are moved by miracles. They inspire us. So it's not surprising that in our Haftarah portion for this week, we have some miracles. Now, we have some miracles in our Torah portion. This Torah portion, Vayeira, is about the announcement that Sarah, Abraham's wife, who is well past menopause, is going to have a child. And it strikes us as pretty miraculous, and that's the story we are told. And so to accompany that, the rabbis have picked a passage from the Book of Kings about not only a miraculous birth, but a miraculous rebirth or a miraculous resurrection. And that brings us to the prophet Elisha. So Elisha, along with his mentor Elijah, are 2 of the great miracle working prophets that appear in the Hebrew Bible. Elijah is more famous, he's got greater celebrity, but interestingly enough, there is a sequence, a story where Elisha says to his mentor, give me a double dose of your spirit. And Elijah does that, and as a result, in the stories that are told about Elisha, he performs precisely double the miracles that Elijah does. So anyway, our Torah portion this week is selected, our Haftarah is selected to go with the Torah portion precisely because there is the miracle of birth that happens in Vayeira in the Torah. And Elisha brings about a miraculous birth, and then an additional story, which is what we'll be reading, to go with it, a twofer, all right? And the twofer is this, that Elisha knows a woman. We only know her by the name the Shunammite woman. We're not completely clear on what a Shunammite is, but they seem to be attached to the people Israel and ancient Israel. And she is a woman who has never had a child. And so Elisha decides to perform a miracle of granting her a child. Now, she's a little skeptical about this, and she tells Elisha, don't taunt me. Don't promise me something that you can't deliver. But he does, in fact, deliver those things. And so a child is born, and the child grows up from infancy to toddler to become a little boy. And then lo and behold, in one of those terrible, unpredictable moments in life, he suddenly becomes ill and apparently, at least apparently, dies. And that then triggers the passage I'm going to be sharing with you. So I'm clicking the wrong button. All right, so here it goes. The child has collapsed and is described as dead. And so she immediately rushes out to find Elisha, who roams around the territory. And this is how the story is told. She went to Mount Carmel and found the man of God, that would be Elisha. Seeing her while she was still some distance away, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, there is the Shunammite woman. Run to meet her and ask her whether she, her husband, and her son are all well. Now, there's a little bit of foreshadowing in that, right? So there's always a literary element going on here. She told him, that is, she told Gehazi when he ran up to her, that they were well. But when she reached the man of God on the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi was about to push her away, but the man of God said, let her be. Her heart is bitter, and the Eternal has kept it from me. So one of the things you immediately learn is that prophets are not omnipotent, and they're not always informed about all matters. She said, did I ask for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, don't deceive me? So there's a good edge of anger in there, that she was given a child and now the child has died. And he said to Gehazi, hurry up, take my staff and go. Do not stop to greet anyone and do not reply to anyone's greeting. Go and put my staff on the boy's face. And the mother said, as the Eternal lives and as you live, I don't know if that's a threat or not, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her back to their home. Gehazi went ahead of them and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sign of life. He turned back to meet Elisha and told him the boy has not awakened. The staff is an interesting element in the story. It probably has something to do with the idea of Moses' staff, which seems to have its own supernal powers. And apparently Elisha thought he could give that power to his staff, but didn't work. All right, so Elisha went into the house, and there was the dead boy lying on his bed. And he went in and he shut the door on the two of them, and he prayed to Adonai. And then he stretched himself out over the boy, placing his mouth, his eyes, and his hands on the boy's mouth, eyes, and hands. And he crouched over him, and the boy's body grew warm. Then Elisha got up and he walked to and fro about the house and again crouched on the boy. The child then sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. And Elisha called Gehazi and told him to call the Shulamite woman. And when she came, he simply said, lift up your son. She threw herself at his feet and bowed down on the ground. And then she lifted up her son and she went away. So, a miracle. Now, what kind of miracle? I'm sure for the majority of Jewish history, when reading that story, it's just a miracle. A boy is dead and he's brought back to life. For those of us who are moderns, who are rationalists, who are familiar with what we are able to do now, which is like CPR and all kinds of resuscitation. People who seem to be dead can, in fact, be brought back to life. We can interpret this in slightly more rationalistic way. Is the laying of the hands and the mouth and the eyes, is it a primitive or anticipatory form of CPR? Is the child not really dead and somehow Elisha detects this and is able to bring the child back? I don't know. There's simply not enough details in the story for us to understand and to make sense of it all. So there's a couple of ways to read this. One is that Elisha performed a miracle at some point. I mean, the staff thing totally went awry, but he performed a miracle, and a child who was dead is brought back to life. On the other hand, we can read it as a kind of premonition of what human beings will be able to do, anticipation of the fact that we can now perform what were once miracles on a daily basis. And regardless of what stance you take, I can't help but feel that this is inspiring and heartwarming. It's an ET moment where I feel good. And I think that's what is intended to do for us, to know that there's always another possibility out there. And if not in Elisha's time, certainly in our time, that we have many reasons to hope when things seem hopeless. And that's our Heartfelt Haftarah for today. Thank you all for joining in.